Welcome back to Don't Forget the Champagne. My name is Nichelle and this is Wedding Planning 101. Today on Wedding Planning 101, we're going to be talking about how to create your guest list. I think besides possibly budget, guest lists can be one of the most stressful aspects of putting together your wedding. There's a lot of elements to consider when you're starting to plan your guest list. The first thing I really encourage couples to think about is just to spend some time thinking about what size you want your wedding to be. Are you imagining a really intimate affair where you only have 30 people in attendance, or are you picturing a huge 300-person wedding where it's a party all night long, you get to invite everyone you ever met, and it's like the talk of the town? There's no right answer, but you do need to kind of consider a few things. So, like I mentioned, having a smaller wedding tends to create a more intimate atmosphere. Not saying that you can't create that with a larger wedding, but it just comes a little bit more organically. It's going to be in a more intimate, probably a little bit more casual affair. If it's smaller, where things tend to ramp up and be a little bit more wild as you get bigger. Like I mentioned, you can kind of create whatever vibe you want, bring in other elements, but size is a factor to consider. The second thing you want to think about is venues. If you've already kind of just started to browse venues, you might have a sense of what venues in your area typically can hold as far as capacity. On average, I would say most venues are around 100 to 150 people. You can certainly find venues for much, much larger than that, and venues that only can fit a few people, like 30 to 50. So if you have your heart set on a particular venue, make sure to think about that when you're starting to put together your guest list. The last thing, as I mentioned in the beginning, is cost. Every guest you invite does tend to add more cost because you're going to have to feed them, provide the alcohol for them, provide them a seat, a place setting at a table. Larger venues tend to be a little bit more costly. So if budget is a top priority for you and having a ton of people there isn't, you might want to lower your guest list. Smaller weddings tend to be a little bit more affordable. Not saying that you can't do a big wedding on a budget, just saying it's a little bit more challenging. Okay, now we're ready to start figuring out the people that are coming. Probably the most important part of putting together a guest list. I recommend couples put together a master list of every single person they want to invite. Put it together in an Excel sheet, and as you're putting in those people, put another column that's your priority. I like to do letters, A, B, and C, like Southwest sporting groups. Your A people are the people you cannot imagine getting married without them being there. So your mom, your sister, your very best friend. Your A group should be relatively small, but it should include anyone who, if they can't be at your wedding day, you're going to be devastated. Then your B group. Those are the people that you would like to be there, but if for whatever reason they can't be there, you'll be okay. This generally includes aunts and uncles and cousins, college roommates, friends are a little bit more distant, but still important to you and your wedding day. And then C group tends to include people that you feel like you should invite. So they're not necessarily people that you're close to anymore, but maybe they're more distant relatives, college roommates that you're not that close with anymore. People like that, people that you feel like some sort of obligation to invite, but might not necessarily be top of mind when you're actually putting together who is important for you to have at your wedding day. Make sure as you're putting this together, you also have a column that's going to have number of guests. We'll talk a little bit more about figuring out if you want to invite kids and plus ones and things, but you want to make sure that your list is not just including the primary person you're inviting, but also anyone they might be coming with. So if they're married, making sure to put 2 in that column because you know that they're going to definitely have a plus 1. If it's your aunt's whole family, maybe it's like 5 in that quantity column. That quantity column is actually going to be a better way to figure out how many people are going to be there. I think sometimes if we just make a list of names, we forget that those people are probably going to bring more people with them. Not all of them, but some of them probably will wind up doing so. Definitely don't try to do this in a day. I recommend at least giving yourself an entire weekend to look over it a few times. It's even better if you can do a few weeks because more people will come to you, like you'll be laying in bed at night and then you'll be like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to put my work wife on the list, but obviously I want her at the wedding. So don't rush this process. It should take a little bit of time to make sure you get everyone that you and your spouse are thinking of. Don't worry too much about the size of the list either at this point. We will be paring it down later. If you do know you want a smaller wedding, maybe be a little bit more choosy when you're assigning priorities. But besides that, I think it's important to put everyone on there just so you have them all in one spot. Once you've done all the brainstorming you possibly can for people that you and your spouse want to invite to your wedding, it's time to talk to the parents or anyone else who might have a strong opinion about who needs to get invited. This is my own opinion, but I personally believe if your parents are financially contributing, especially like a large amount, that they should have a pretty decent say in who you invite. You should make sure that they have some input. If they haven't contributed financially, I think you're less obligated to give them a say, but oftentimes to avoid family drama, and because, they're still your parents and they raised you, even if they're not giving you money for your wedding, I think it's important to at least consult them and give them a little bit of flexibility to add some people to the guest list. I find the best way to involve your parents in this guest list process without just opening a whole box of family drama is to give them a certain number of people that they get to invite. Whether that's 5 people or 50 people, you can kind of decide that based on how big your wedding is and how much they're involved in the planning process. Let them pick people that for sure you're going to be inviting. And give them a number just like you're working with a number. That way they can prioritize. If they're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to invite all the girls from my bingo group. I'm going to invite every single person I ever taught with. While we're talking about teachers, maybe we should invite all of your elementary school, middle school, and high school teachers too. If they realize that they're only working with a list of about 10 people, they're not going to be trying to add randos to the list, or at least hopefully. Also, don't show them your list beforehand. If they're like, oh, Aunt Margaret's already at the top of the list, I don't need to add her to my people, great, that gives me more room for my randos. So do not let them see the guest list ahead of time, have them put together their list, and assure that those people will be invited unless for some reason you have some major issue with them coming. Make sure that they are clear that the number you're giving them is the number of seats at tables they will have, not the number of groups. Don't they be thinking that they have 10 people to invite and one of those people can be a whole family. It's 5, 10, 15, 20, however many you gave them, seats. Make sure that's really clear, because otherwise it can cause issues. Once they've given you that list of people, mark them immediately as A's on that Excel sheet because they are automatically going to come. Trying to go back on that and be like, well, actually, Mom, even though I told you could invite 10 people, once we actually looked at our overall guest list, it looks like I'm only going to be able to let you invite 8, so the Carols can't come. It's not going to go over well. It's going to start a fight, most likely. So if at all possible, make sure it is very, very clear to you how many people your parents can be inviting. All right, we're going to pause the guest list process just for a minute so we can talk about plus ones and children, because I think these are both very controversial topics when it comes to guest list. And at the end of the day, it is your choice. I'm going to give you a little bit of advice on what I think about plus ones and about children, but you do you. As far as plus ones, I think the 2 rules that are pretty much always followed and I would recommend you follow are anyone who is married or I would even include engaged or super long-term partner gets to bring their partner. I would also include in that should get a plus one almost no matter what, is people who aren't going to know anyone at your wedding. I think even if your best friend from kindergarten who moved to Arkansas after kindergarten, but you guys kept in touch as pen pals all these years, but she's never met anyone else in your friend group, is coming, and even if she's a nun, she gets a plus one. She can bring her cousin. But it's so terrible to go to something like this and know literally no one. It's just a recipe for something awkward. And if they feel like they can handle it, sometimes people turn down their plus ones, which is great. Another plate we don't have to pay for. But anyone who doesn't have a group or is married or close enough to married, I think should get a plus one automatically. I also tend to err on the side of giving out more plus ones than others, just because I find that people tend to, 1, be more likely to come to your wedding, they can have a plus one, and 2, feel more comfortable. It creates an easier environment on your wedding day because people are at ease because they have another person with them. I also tend to include plus ones for anyone who's not attending as part of a group. So your cousin's attending with her parents, so they're a group, she doesn't need a plus one, but a lot of times friends that are getting invited are coming by themselves. Even if they might know some of your other friends, you don't know how close they are anymore. I think it's kind to extend them a +1. Or even if they are coming as a group, let's say all of your college friends are traveling together, you know that they're all super close, but only one of them doesn't have a boyfriend that is also invited. If everyone else in the group is getting a +1, they should also get a +1. But again, it's up to you, and I think this also varies depending on the size of your wedding. If you're having a tiny wedding, maybe like almost no one gets +1s, and I think that makes a lot more sense for a small wedding, whereas if you're having a 300-person wedding, it's a little harder to justify why you're not giving your college roommate a +1. And then children are totally up to you. I think children at weddings can be great, but I also think adult-only weddings can be great. It is really what you're envisioning for your wedding day. My biggest piece of advice for you if you're deciding not to invite children is to decide some firm rules. Are you not inviting anyone under the age of 13? Are you only inviting the children of immediate family members, so like your sister's kids? If you're like cutting off children, make sure there's like a hard and fast rule and there's no exceptions. Because that way when people are like, oh, can I bring my kids? You can be like, no, we're not allowing anyone under 13. Or like, no, the only kids that are gonna be there are my nieces and nephews. They still will probably balk at it and not be excited, but that's not your problem. If you can justify your explanation, it kind of nips any arguments that might fester from that in the bud. I would also keep in mind that if you're not inviting kids, the number of people that are attending, especially out of town guests, is probably going to decrease a little bit, just because then they do have to go through the process of finding babysitters and things. So just something to keep in mind if you are trying to decide whether you're going to include kids or not. There's a lot more things to consider. I will probably make a video about it at some point, but Jamie Wolfer actually has a great video about no kid weddings and how to put it on invitations and things like that, and I'll make sure to link that video in the description. Now, back to the process. So at this point, you have probably a very long list of names, because it's all of your names, all of your future spouse's names, all of everyone's parents' names, anyone else is on this big Excel sheet. At this point, I imagine it's been a few weeks. It should have been. Again, don't do this in a weekend. I think that's a big mistake. Now's the time where you're really gonna have to nail down what you want your guest count to look like. I think having the names in front of you can help determine it somewhat. You've considered the factors that you had at the beginning. We talked about venue and like the overall vibe and also your budget. But now you have the people in front of you. So you have to pick a number. See where that number lands in terms of your list. Are you going to be able to invite all of your B people? Is it going to be A people only? Is it going to also include some C people? Kind of figure out where that hits. If there are any groups that are fully in there, you can just bump those people. They're on your list. You know you're good. If you're going to have to cut people from a group or add just a couple people from another group, that's where the negotiations and the conversations need to start happening. And that's why I suggest you do the parent thing earlier, because those people are already in, so you don't need to consult them at this point, unless you want to and you enjoy having their input. Then obviously talk to them. But at this point, it's just between you and your spouse, figuring out who else you want to invite based on where your cutoff is. On average, about 80% of the people you'll invite will come. However, and this is a big however, I never recommend inviting more people than your venue can hold. Because what if more people show up? That is just an average. Sometimes they're way lower. Like if you have a destination wedding, like it'll be closer to 50 maybe. Or it'll be higher. It's like an off weekend. Most of your guests are in town. Maybe they haven't had a wedding in a while. You're doing it just like an off year for your friend group. Maybe your count is way higher. It would stress me out too much. Like, you do you to invite more people than I have room for. Sometimes as a solution to this, people will do a second round of invitations. I get a little nervous about that too, just because people get their invitations later, can kind of mess up RSVP and final numbers dates, but there are definitely ways to make that work if that's something that you're interested in. Again, my biggest tip for guest list is don't try to do this in an afternoon. This is a process that should take a while. You don't need to have your guest list finalized until your save the dates go out. Once those go out, they have to be pretty final, because anyone who gets a save the date is going to be anticipating being invited to your wedding. But before that, you can take a minute. You can look at it 1 week, take a week off, look at it again. Play with the numbers a little bit. You need an anticipated guest count so you can start shopping for venues and things, but the people that actually go into that guest count, no one needs to know that until save the dates are sent. So, look at your guest list multiple times. Keep coming back to it, making sure it feels right for what you're looking for and what you envision your day to be. All right, that is all I have for today's Wedding Planning 101. Let me know if you have any questions about guest list or about any of the other topics that we've covered so far in this series. All right, I will see you next week with another topic. Bye.